The colony of Velkar Mound had ruled the eastern dunes for 40 generations. Its tunnels stretched deeper than any termite mound for miles. Its granaries overflowed with seed stores, and its soldiers, the Red Guard, had never lost a war. Then the giants came. They arrived without warning, pale, segmented creatures 3 times the size of any ant in the colony, marching in columns that stretched from the old fig root to the edge of the known world. The scouts who first saw them didn't return. The second wave of scouts came back missing limbs, speaking of jaws that could shear through chitin like dry grass. Queen Sarah Ith called her generals to the deep chamber. Among them was Tarn, a young officer of the Red Guard, barely 3 molts old, who had never seen real combat, only border skirmishes with rival ant colonies, disputes settled in hours. "They're termites," said General Korak, the oldest soldier in the colony, his mandibles scarred white from old battles. "But not like any termites I've fought. They've come from beyond the dry river. Something drove them here, something worse than us, or they wouldn't risk this march." "How many?" the Queen asked. "We stopped counting at 10,000. The chamber went silent. Velkar Mound's entire fighting force numbered perhaps 3,000. Tarn was given command of the eastern tunnel, the first line the giants would reach. It was considered a death post, which was why a junior officer got it. "They'll come through the narrow passage first," Korak told him, tracing the tunnel maps with a foreleg. "It's the only entrance wide enough for them, but it's also the only place where size becomes a weakness. A giant can't turn in a tight space, can't use its full reach. So we fight them one at a time," Tarn said. "You fight them where we choose, not where they choose. That's the only way 3,000 becomes enough." For 7 days, the colony prepared. Soldiers packed the narrow passage with barbed seed husks, turning the tunnel floor into a gauntlet of spikes. Workers diverted an underground spring to flood a side chamber, creating a drowning trap. Every ant who could carry a grain of sand spent it reinforcing the choke point, until the passage was barely wide enough for 2 soldiers to stand shoulder to shoulder. On the 8th day, the ground began to shake. The first giant termite that squeezed into the tunnel was a soldier cast. Its head alone was the size of 3 ants standing together, its mandibles like curved blades. It came fast, faster than anything that size should move, and the front line of the Red Guard braced as one. Tarn gave the signal. The first volley of soldiers darted forward, not to fight, but to bite and retreat, drawing the giant's mandibles down into the barbed husks below. It roared, a sound none of them had words for. Ants don't make sound the way larger creatures do, but the vibration of it rattled through the tunnel walls and thrashed, and in its thrashing, it became wedged. That was the opening. 20 soldiers swarmed the joints between its armor plates, the only places Cheaton didn't cover, and it was over in moments. But behind it came another, and another. By the 4th hour, the narrow passage was a wall of bodies, giant and ant alike, and the Red Guard had lost nearly a third of its soldiers. Tarn fought until his mandibles were slick and his antennae rang from the vibrations of collapsing tunnel walls. Twice he was nearly crushed by falling debris. Once, a dying giant's leg pinned him for several heartbeats before 2 of his soldiers dragged him free. The giants kept coming. And coming. By nightfall, the front line had retreated to the second chamber, the one rigged with the diverted spring. Tarn had lost contact with Korak's forces on the western tunnels. Runners reported the giants were attacking 3 entrances at once, something the colony scouts had completely failed to anticipate. "They're not just bigger," Tarn realized, watching the giants regroup at the chamber's threshold. "They're coordinated. Something is directing them." He had no time to consider what that meant. The giants surged into the second chamber, and Tarn gave the second signal. The diversion dams broke. Water roared into the chamber, sweeping giants and ants alike off their feet. Ants, lighter and faster, scrambled up the pre-marked escape tunnels carved into the ceiling. The giants, heavier, were swept into the lower passages, straight into a second barbed gauntlet the workers had built below. It wasn't a victory. It was a trade. Roughly 600 giants drowned or impaled, against 400 ants lost to the flood itself. But for the first time since the giants arrived, the Eastern Front held. 3 days later, Tarn, now the senior surviving officer of the Eastern Front, Korak having been gravely wounded in the west, was summoned before Queen Sarah Ith. With him came something unexpected: a giant termite, alive, captured in the flood and too injured to fight. A translator caste worker, one of the few ants able to read the chemical signals of other species, had spent a day with the creature. "They didn't choose to invade us," the translator reported. "Something came through the dry riverbed from the far side, something the giants call only the dark tide. It consumed their home mounds whole. Every termite that could march did. They didn't know we were here. They were just running." The chamber was silent again, but differently this time. "How far behind them is it?" the Queen asked. The translator's antennae trembled. 2 days, maybe less.